He was the wolf in an Armani suit, the king of New York's underworld who turned blood money into billion-dollar empires. Dante Salvatore, ruthless, untouchable, feared. Tonight, none of that power mattered. Tonight, his father had come to pass judgment. Don Vincenzo Salvatore, the old lion from Sicily, sat at table 7 like a king who'd never left his throne. The restaurant held its breath. Billionaires froze mid-sip. Even the shadows seemed to bow. Then she entered. Zara, the quiet waitress, the one every eye looked through but never saw. She moved toward the old Don, the man who'd built empires on bones and silence. And when he spoke in the ancient tongue of Sicily, expecting confusion, expecting submission, she answered him, in perfect Sicilian. 5 words that shattered the silence and brought the most powerful family in New York to a standstill. Welcome back to Dark Heart Mafia. Before we dive into this dangerous tale of vengeance, power, and impossible love, make sure you hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what Mafia romance stories you want to see next. Every click, every comment helps us keep bringing you these thrilling stories you don't want to miss. Now let's begin the story of Zara Rossi, the woman who spoke the language of kings and changed everything. What did she say? And who was she? Stick around. This isn't just a story about power. It's about the ghosts we can never bury. Dante Salvatore wasn't just a name. It was a warning whispered in boardrooms and back alleys from Manhattan to Milan. At 36, he'd done what his father never could. He'd transformed a brutal Sicilian crime family into a sleek modern empire. Luxury real estate, private equity, legitimate political influence, all of it pristine on paper, all of it built on a foundation of carefully hidden violence and blood-soaked secrets. But tonight, in the elegant crystal chandelier dining room of Il Cielo, the restaurant he owned on Manhattan's Upper East Side, Dante's carefully constructed world was about to crack wide open. His father, Don Vincenzo Salvatore, had arrived from Sicily without warning. A man who still believed in blood oaths and ancient codes. A man who saw his son's Manhattan penthouse as nothing more than a gilded cage of American weakness. And then there was Zara, beautiful, invisible Zara Rossi, with her flawless dark skin, her intelligent eyes, and the kind of quiet grace that made even the wealthiest customers forget she existed. She'd worked at Il Cielo for 18 months, always on time, always competent, always overlooked, until tonight. Until she opened her mouth and spoke words that shouldn't have been possible, words that would change everything. Il Cielo wasn't just a restaurant. It was a temple to excess, perched on the 20th floor of a building Dante owned outright. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, Italian marble floors, Venetian glass chandeliers that cost more than most people's houses. The kind of place where senators sat 3 tables away from hedge fund criminals and everyone pretended not to notice. Zara moved through this world like a shadow. Black uniform, pressed to perfection. Hair pulled back in a severe bun that showed off her elegant neck. White apron spotless. She carried trays with the kind of practiced grace that came from 18 months of deliberate invisibility. But inside, Zara Rossi was counting the days, counting the opportunities, counting the cost of revenge. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, speaking in that ancient Sicilian dialect that had filled their small apartment in Queens. Zara, mia cara, mai dimenticare chi sei. Never forget who you are. You are the last of the Rossi. Our blood, our honor, our truth. It lives in you. Rosa Rossi had died 2 years ago. Her final words a confession that had turned Zara's world inside out. The Salvatore family, the same family whose restaurant she now served in, had ordered the massacre of the Rossi clan in 1994. Zara's grandfather, Don Franco Rossi, had been executed. Her uncles, murdered. Her mother had escaped only because she was pregnant and in America, hidden by Rosa, who'd fled Sicily, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a baby growing in her belly. Zara had spent those 2 years preparing, learning everything about the Salvatores, getting hired at Il Cielo, becoming invisible, waiting for the perfect moment. "Zara!" Robert, the floor manager, snapped his fingers in front of her face. "Are you listening?" She blinked, lowering her eyes in the submissive way that made men like Robert dismiss her. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry." "Don Vincenzo Salvatore arrives tonight, from Sicily." Robert's voice dropped to a whisper. "Mr. Salvatore's father. You understand what that means?" Zara's heart stopped. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for. "You'll be serving the private dining room, table 7. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact. You are invisible. Understood?" "Understood," Zara whispered. As Robert walked away, Zara's hand went to the small silver cross her grandmother had given her, the only thing she'd kept from the old country. Inside its hollow chamber was a microphone, no bigger than a grain of rice. For 18 months, she'd been recording conversations, hoping to catch something, anything, that would expose the Salvatores. Tonight, she would finally face the man who'd destroyed her family. The front entrance of Il Cielo cleared at exactly 8 p.m. No ordinary customers tonight, only Dante's inner circle. The air itself seemed to thicken with tension. Zara watched from the service corridor as 2 black armored sedans pulled up to the building's private entrance, the kind of vehicles that cost more than a house and could withstand a rocket attack. Dante Salvatore stood at the entrance, and even Zara, who hated him with every fiber of her being, had to admit he was magnificent. 6'3", broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal Tom Ford suit that probably cost $15,000. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes that made people nervous. Cold, gray. The eyes of a man who'd made impossible decisions and slept just fine afterward. Tonight, though, those eyes held something Zara had never seen before. Uncertainty. The car door opened. Don Vincenzo Salvatore emerged, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He was shorter than his son, maybe 5'9", and in his late 70s, but he commanded space like a man twice his size. He wore a heavy wool suit that had been fashionable in 1985, and clearly didn't care. His face was deeply lined, weathered by Sicilian sun and 70 years of brutal decisions. His eyes were black, not brown, but truly black, and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. In his right hand, he carried a simple wooden cane, gnarled and worn smooth by decades of use. Behind Don Vincenzo came his bodyguards, 2 massive Sicilian men who looked like they'd been carved from the same mountain, silent, lethal, watching everything. Dante stepped forward, and Zara watched something she'd never thought she'd see. Dante Salvatore, the Wolf of Wall Street, bowed his head to another man. "Padre," Dante said, his voice respectful. "Welcome to New York." Don Vincenzo said nothing. He simply walked past his son, barely acknowledging him, and entered the restaurant. His cane tapped against the marble floor with each step, a sound like a judge's gavel. Beside Dante stood Marco Valente, his consigliere. Marco was in his 50s, lean and sharp-featured, with eyes that never stopped moving. He dressed well, spoke softly, and Zara knew from 18 months of observation that he was the most dangerous man in the room after Dante himself. "Your father seems displeased," Marco murmured. "My father is always displeased," Dante replied, his jaw tight. "Let's get this over with." Zara stood in the private dining room, her hands steady despite her racing heart. The room was intimate. Just one long table, 8 chairs, wine already breathing on the sideboard. Candles flickered. Classical Italian music played softly. The door opened. Don Vincenzo entered first, his black eyes sweeping the room with the practiced assessment of a predator. Then Dante, then Marco, and the two bodyguards. Don Vincenzo took the head of the table without being asked. Dante sat to his right, Marco to his left. The bodyguard stood by the door, hands folded in front of them. Zara approached with water, her eyes down, her movements precise. She poured for Don Vincenzo first. Protocol demanded it, then Dante, then Marco. "So," Don Vincenzo said, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. He wasn't speaking English. He wasn't even speaking Italian. He was speaking the deep, guttural Sicilian dialect, the ancient tongue of Palermo and Corleone, the language of shepherds and kings, unchanged for 1,000 years. "This is your empire? Glass towers and soft Americans?" Dante responded in Italian, clean, academic Italian, the language of Rome, not Sicily. "Father, I've built something sustainable, profitable. The family has never been stronger financially." Don Vincenzo waved a dismissive hand. "Money. You speak to me of money like a banker. Where is the blood? Where is the honor?" Dante's face tightened, but he said nothing. Marco shifted uncomfortably. The Don turned his gaze to Zara, who stood perfectly still by the wall. He looked at her the way one might look at a piece of furniture, registering her presence but assigning no importance to it. "Wine," he barked at her in Sicilian. "Red. Something that tastes of earth, not of smoke and American pretense." This was it, the moment, the choice. Zara could nod, terrified and confused, and fetch Robert to translate. She could remain invisible, safe, or she could step into the light and set everything in motion. She thought of her grandmother's voice. "Never forget who you are." Zara took one step forward. She raised her eyes and looked directly into Don Vincenzo Salvatore's black gaze. And then, in perfect, flawless Sicilian, with the accent of Corleone, with the inflection of the old country, she replied, "Buonasera, Don Vincenzo. È un onore servire un uomo del vecchio paese." She spoke the words with perfect inflection. "Good evening, Don Vincenzo. It is an honor to serve a man of the old country." The effect was instantaneous. Marco's hand dropped to the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. One of the bodyguards actually stepped forward, eyes wide. Dante went absolutely pale. His water glass frozen halfway to his lips, but it was Don Vincenzo's reaction that filled the room. The old man's eyes ignited, from dull contempt to laser-focused intensity in a heartbeat. He leaned forward, both hands on his cane, staring at Zara with the kind of attention that could peel the skin from bones. "You," he whispered in Sicilian. "You speak like someone born in the hills. How?" Zara kept her eyes respectful but didn't lower them. "My grandmother, Don Salvatore. She was from Corleone. She never spoke English to me. She said the old words had more power than the new ones." "Corleone," Don Vincenzo repeated, tasting the word. A smile, cold, predatory, fascinated, spread across his weathered face. "What was your grandmother's name?" "Rosa," Zara replied, mixing English and Sicilian as a native speaker might. "Rosa Rossi." The name hung in the air. Rossi. If Don Vincenzo recognized it, he gave no sign. Not yet. Dante found his voice. "Zara, what the hell?" Don Vincenzo silenced his son with a single raised finger. Dante's mouth snapped shut. The Don spoke to Zara again. "You will bring the wine, the one you choose, a wine with roots, not American pretense, and then you will pour it for me." He turned to Dante, switching to heavily accented English for the first time. "This one, she stays. She will be my voice. Your Italian is an insult to my ears." Dante stared at his father, then at Zara, then back at his father. "Padre, she's just a waitress. She is the only person in this room who speaks like a human being instead of a calculator," Don Vincenzo snapped. "She stays. Everyone else, out. I will speak with the girl about wine. You go manage your empire of glass." It was a calculated humiliation, a public dismissal. Dante's face went from pale to red, but he stood. Marco and the bodyguards followed. As Dante passed Zara, their eyes met for just a second. In his gaze, she saw confusion, suspicion, and something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. Then he was gone. The door closed, and Zara was alone with the man who'd destroyed her family. For the next 3 days, Zara Rossi became a ghost who'd learned to speak. Don Vincenzo Salvatore didn't just request her presence, he commanded it. She arrived at Il Cielo at 7 a.m. and left at midnight. She sat in on meetings with Dante's captains, translating the Don's Sicilian into English and Dante's corporate speak into the language of blood and honor. The old man confided in her, spoke of Sicily, of olive groves he owned outside Palermo, of disappointment in his son's soft American ways. And Zara recorded everything, her grandmother's cross hanging against her chest, its hidden microphone capturing every word. But she was playing a dangerous game, and she knew it. On the 3rd night, Zara sat behind Don Vincenzo's chair in the private dining room as he held court. Dante and his captains sat around the table, 5 men who controlled everything from the docks to the construction unions. "My father says," Zara translated, her voice calm and professional, "that your quarterly projections sound like the language of a man who's forgotten that loyalty cannot be measured in profit margins. He asks if you've forgotten that blood is thicker than balance sheets." The captain, a thick-necked man named Sal, went red in the face. Dante's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Don Vincenzo continued in Sicilian, and Zara translated. "He says that in his day a man's word was his bond. Now you have contracts with more lawyers than witnesses. This is not honor. This is weakness." After the meeting, Dante cornered Zara in the hallway. "Who are you?" he demanded. "I'm the translator," Zara replied, her voice steady. "You're a waitress who speaks like she was born in a Sicilian mountain village. That doesn't just happen. So I'll ask you again. Who are you?" "I'm no one, Mr. Salvatore. Just someone whose grandmother taught her well." Dante stepped closer. Up close, he was overwhelming. 6'3" of controlled violence and expensive cologne. But Zara held her ground. "I don't believe in coincidences," Dante said softly. "And I'm going to find out what you're really doing here." "Then I suppose you'll have to look," Zara replied. For a moment, something passed between them. A spark of mutual recognition. 2 people playing games neither fully understood yet. Then Marco appeared at the end of the hallway, his sharp eyes missing nothing. "Boss," Marco said, "we need to talk." Dante's eyes lingered on Zara for 1 more second. Then he walked away. But Zara knew the clock was ticking. Marco was too smart, too suspicious. It was only a matter of time before he discovered the truth. It was 2 a.m. when Dante found her in the wine cellar. Zara had thought she was alone, taking a moment to breathe in the cold, quiet dark. She'd removed the cross necklace, checking the recording device inside. Then the door locked. She spun around. Dante stood there, blocking the only exit, still wearing his suit from dinner but with his tie loosened, his jacket off. He looked exhausted and dangerous. "You don't exist," Dante said without preamble. "Zara Rossi didn't exist before 2 years ago. No social media, no credit history, no school records, nothing." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. "Maybe I value my privacy. Don't insult me." Dante took a step closer. "I've been doing research, digging, and I found something interesting. A woman named Rosa Rossi entered the United States in 1994, pregnant, fleeing Sicily. She claimed her husband died in a farming accident." Zara's blood ran cold. "But that's not the interesting part," Dante continued. "The interesting part is the name, Rossi, my father's generation. They buried that name, wiped it from Sicily. So tell me, who are you really? The walls were closing in. Zara could lie, could try to run, but looking into Dante's eyes, she knew it was over. My name, she said quietly, is Zara Rossi, granddaughter of Don Franco Rossi, the man your father murdered in cold blood along with my entire family. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Dante didn't move, didn't react, just stared at her with those cold gray eyes. They killed my grandfather, Zara continued, her voice shaking now with barely controlled rage. They killed my uncles. They tried to kill my mother while she was still pregnant with me. My grandmother fled to America with nothing. She raised me in hiding, teaching me Sicilian so I would never forget who I was. She died 2 years ago, and with her last breath, she told me the truth. Your father destroyed my family. And so you came here for revenge, Dante said. It wasn't a question. I came here for justice. There's no difference in our world. Then yes, Zara spat. I came here to destroy him, to destroy all of you. Dante was silent for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound. Do you know what it's like, he said quietly, to build an empire on mass graves? To know that everything you have, every dollar, every property, every moment of power, is built on the bones of innocent people? Zara stared at him, caught off guard. I've spent my entire life trying to be different from him, Dante continued. Trying to legitimize the family, to wash the blood off our name, but it doesn't work. The past doesn't disappear just because you build something new on top of it. He looked at Zara, and for the first time, she saw something other than cold calculation in his eyes. She saw pain. I researched the Rossi massacre when I was 23, Dante said. Read every file my father kept. Your grandfather, your uncles, women, children, all of them slaughtered. And you know what I did? Nothing. Because I was a coward. Because I was too afraid of what it would mean to confront him. Why are you telling me this? Zara whispered. Because part of me hates you for lying to me, Dante said, stepping closer. And part of me understands exactly why you did it. Part of me wants you to succeed. The air between them crackled with tension. Hatred. Understanding. Something else neither wanted to name. Before either could speak again, alarms blared, footsteps in the hallway. He knows, Dante said urgently. Marco, he's been investigating you too. The door burst open. Marco stood there, a manila envelope in his hand, his eyes cold with triumph. Boss, Marco said. We have a problem. Marco Valente laid the evidence on the wine cellar table like a prosecutor presenting a murder weapon. Baptismal certificate, immigration records, photographs. The final photo was of an older man, distinguished, powerful, with eyes that looked hauntingly familiar. Don Franco Rossi, Marco said, looking at Zara. Your grandfather. The resemblance is unmistakable. Same eyes, same bone structure. He turned to Dante. Boss, she's a Rossi. The family we destroyed 30 years ago. She's here to kill Don Vincenzo. Omerta demands her death. Immediately. Dante stared at the photograph. Then at Zara. Then at Marco. Get out, Dante said quietly. Boss, I don't think you I said get out, Marco. Now. Marco's face went pale. You're protecting her? A Rossi? I'm giving you an order, Dante said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Leave. Now. And do not speak of this to anyone, including my father. Do you understand me? For a moment, Marco looked like he might argue. Then he saw something in Dante's face that made him back down. Yes, Don, Marco said, using the title deliberately. He gathered his evidence and left. The door closed. Silence. Why? Zara breathed. Why didn't you let him kill me? Dante turned to face her. Because maybe I'm tired of paying for my father's sins. Maybe I want to see him answer for what he did. Or maybe... He stopped. Maybe what? Maybe you're the only real thing I've encountered in years, Dante finished. The confession hung between them. Dangerous. Impossible. Marco will go to your father the moment he can, Zara said. I know. Then we're both dead. Probably. Zara laughed, despite herself. So what do we do? Dante looked at her for a long moment. Then he made his decision. We confront him. Together, we force the truth into the light, and whatever happens after that, happens. You'd betray your own father? I'd finally stop being his accomplice, Dante corrected. There's a difference. Zara studied his face, looking for the lie, the trap. She found none. Why should I trust you? Because right now, I'm the only chance you have of getting out of this alive, Dante replied. And you're the only chance I have of finally being free. Two people, trapped by their father's legacies, standing in a wine cellar in the middle of the night, making a pact that would either save them or destroy them both. Tomorrow night, Dante said. We go to him together. Are you ready? Zara thought of her grandmother, of justice, of revenge. I've been ready for 2 years, she said. The Pierre Hotel, penthouse suite, Don Vincenzo Salvatore's temporary throne. Dante and Zara arrived together at 9 p.m. The bodyguards looked confused, but let them pass. Dante was still the heir, still their future Don. Don Vincenzo sat in a high-backed chair by the window, a glass of Amaro in his weathered hand. He looked up as they entered, his black eyes sharp. Figlio, he said in Italian, and the translator. What brings you here at this hour? We need to talk, Padre, Dante said, about the past, about the Rossi family. The old Don's eyes narrowed. What of them? Zara stepped forward. Her heart was hammering, but her voice was steady. My name is Zara Rossi, she said in Sicilian, granddaughter of Don Franco Rossi. You ordered the massacre of my family 30 years ago. For the first time, Zara saw genuine shock cross Don Vincenzo's face. You, he whispered. The child. You survived. Did you order it, father? Dante demanded. The women? The children? All of them. Don Vincenzo stood slowly, leaning on his cane. His face had gone pale. No, he said. I gave no such order. Liar, Zara shouted. I am not a liar, Don Vincenzo roared, slamming his cane against the floor. I sanctioned the removal of Franco Rossi. He was my rival. But it was supposed to be clean. One bullet. Honor between men. He turned to the window, his shoulders slumping. It was Antonio Valente, Marco's father, my consigliere at the time. He went behind my back. He wanted the Rossi territory, the Rossi shipping routes. He told me there was a war, that the Rossis had struck first. By the time I learned the truth, the old Don's voice broke. Franco Rossi was my blood brother. We grew up together in Corleone. We swore oaths as boys. When I learned what Antonio had done, that he'd butchered women and children in my name, I wanted to kill him myself. But the damage was done. The lie had become the foundation of my power. To admit the truth would have destroyed everything. Don Vincenzo turned to face Zara. And she saw something she never expected to see in the eyes of her family's destroyer. Tears. You have your grandfather's eyes, he whispered. I see him in you. I've lived with his ghost for 30 years. I knew the moment I heard you speak that God had sent you, judgment after all these years. Zara's world tilted. This wasn't the monster she'd imagined. This was a man haunted by sins that weren't even entirely his own. Why didn't you tell anyone the truth? Dante asked. Because I was a coward, Don Vincenzo said simply. Because I chose power over honor, and I've paid for it every day since. Before anyone could speak, the door burst open. Marco Valente stood there, a gun in his hand, flanked by 2 armed men. So it's true, Marco said, his voice dripping with venom. The Trident and the Rossi bitch, conspiring against the Don. Marco! Dante started. My father built this empire, Marco shouted. He did what was necessary, and now you want to destroy it all for some whore who speaks a dead language? Don Vincenzo straightened, his voice cold as winter. Your father was a butcher who acted without honor. My father made you king, Marco screamed. He aimed the gun at Dante. You were always weak, just like he said. Everything happened at once. Don Vincenzo moved faster than a man his age should be able to move. He stepped in front of Dante, his cane coming up like a sword. Marco fired. The bullet hit Don Vincenzo in the chest. The old Don staggered, but didn't fall. With his last strength, he swung the cane. A hidden blade sprang from its tip, catching Marco across the throat. Marco fell, blood pooling beneath him. Don Vincenzo collapsed into Dante's arms. Padre! Dante cried. The bodyguards burst in, saw Marco dead, saw the Don dying. It was Valente! Don Vincenzo gasped. Traitor! Like his father! They understand? I understand, Padre, Dante said, tears streaming down his face. Don Vincenzo looked at Zara. Your grandfather was the best man I ever knew. Forgive. An old man's sins. I forgive you, Zara whispered. Figlio, Don Vincenzo said to Dante. End the old ways. Build something better. That's how you honor me. And with that, Don Vincenzo Salvatore, the Lion of Sicily, closed his eyes for the last time. 6 months later. Il Cielo had changed. The private dining room was now open to the public. The criminal empire was being systematically dismantled, its legitimate holdings preserved, its dark underbelly exposed and cut away. Dante Salvatore sat at table 7, but he wasn't alone. Beside him, wearing an elegant black dress and her grandmother's silver cross, sat Zara Rossi Salvatore. She no longer wore a waitress uniform. She sat as an equal partner, co-owner of the restaurant, co-architect of the family's transformation. On her finger, alongside her wedding band, was her grandmother's ring, returned from the safety deposit box where Rosa had hidden it for 30 years. They're calling us revolutionaries, Dante said, reading the newspaper. The Salvatore Rossi Alliance, dismantling the old Mafia structure. My grandmother would have liked that, Zara said softly. Revolution through remembrance. Do you think we'll succeed? I think we're trying. That's more than your father ever did. Dante took her hand. I'm sorry. For everything my family did to yours. I know, and I forgive you. Just like I forgave him. They sat in silence, watching the sun set over Central Park, two families united at last. Zara thought of her grandmother's final words. Never forget who you are. She hadn't forgotten. She'd transformed it. The old words had power. But Zara Rossi had proven they could be used to build, not just to destroy. Some empires are built on blood. Others are built on redemption. This was their new reign. Thank you so much for watching Zara and Dante's story to the very end. If you made it this far, you're a true member of the Dark Heart Mafia family, and I appreciate you more than you know. What did you think? Could you forgive Don Vincenzo like Zara did? Do you believe Dante and Zara can truly build something beautiful from the ashes of their family's bloody past? And what would you have done in Zara's place? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I love hearing what you think. If you enjoyed this tale of vengeance, redemption, and dangerous love, smash that like button to let me know, and subscribe to Dark Heart Mafia if you haven't already, so you never miss another incredible story like this one. Next time, we have an even more intense story coming your way. You won't want to miss it. Until then, stay powerful, stay fearless, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun or a knife. It's the truth spoken in the right language at the right moment. See you in the next story, Dark Hearts.